Hey everyone! Today I'm going to tell you a powerful story from the past. The story of Jan Hus. A man who stood up to one of the most powerful groups of his time and paid a huge price for it. Jan Hus, sometimes called Jan Hus, was a priest and teacher from the Czech Republic. He got inspired by the ideas of an English thinker named John Wycliffe. Hus started to question what the church was doing. Back in those days, the church wasn't just about religion. It was the most powerful group in Europe. People believed that if you didn't follow what the church said, you could end up in hell forever. So almost everyone did what the church told them to do. But by the Middle Ages, the church had started to care more about power and money than about helping people's souls. Even before Hus's time, anyone who spoke out against the church was called a heretic and punished. But no matter how hard the church tried to silence people, new voices kept speaking up. One of those voices was John Wycliffe, a priest in England. He was lucky because some powerful nobles protected him. Even though the church eventually called him a heretic too, his writings had already spread, including to Bohemia, where Jan Hus lived and worked. Hus was already well known in Prague for his strong preaching. But when he read Wycliffe's ideas, it really made sense to him. He saw how the church was taking money from people by selling indulgences. These were papers that claimed to reduce time a soul spent in purgatory. Hus thought this was wrong and started speaking out about it. He said the church was no longer focused on helping people live good lives, but was instead focused on money and control. The church didn't like that. Even though they promised Hus he could explain his side safely in court, they lied. He was arrested and burned at the stake in 1415. But that wasn't the end of his story. Hus had a lot of supporters called Hussites. They refused to give up his fight, which led to a series of wars called the Hussite Wars. These fights lasted for more than 10 years. In the end, the church's side won, but Hus's message didn't disappear. It stayed alive in the hearts of many people. Later on, Martin Luther, the man who started the Protestant Reformation, read about Jan Hus and agreed with a lot of his ideas. Even though Hus didn't know Luther, many of the things he believed helped inspire big changes in the church many years later. So who was Jan Hus before all this? He was born around the year 1369 in a small village called Hussite, in what's now the Czech Republic. His real last name isn't known. He was just called Jan, the son of Michael. He grew up in a poor family. His early life was full of hard work, helping his mom on their small farm. They lived in a tiny house with a dirt floor and a roof that leaked. His mom taught him how to read using a Czech version of the Bible, and hoped he and his brother could become priests. That was one of the only ways to live a better life back then. When he was about 9 or 10 years old, Jan left home to learn Latin, probably at a nearby monastery. His mom wanted him to get a good education and become a priest. He was a smart student and did really well. He moved to Prague and earned his bachelor's degree in 1393, and his master's in 1396. Then, in 1402, his friend Jerome came back from England with some of Wycliffe's writings. Wycliffe had said some bold things, like the Pope didn't have special powers, and the church was too focused on wealth and control. Wycliffe even said a famous document called the Donation of Constantine was fake. That document claimed a Roman emperor gave control of the Western world to the Pope. Wycliffe said it was a lie, and Hus agreed. Hus didn't just repeat Wycliffe's words. He believed them and used them to create his own strong messages. In 1402, he became head of the University of Prague and the priest at Bethlehem Chapel. That chapel was special because it had church services in the Czech language instead of Latin. Hus preached using the Czech Bible and connected deeply with the people. Thousands came to hear him speak because he made things clear, real, and powerful. And the fight between Jan Hus and the church didn't just stay quiet. It became a big deal. Bohemia, a region in Europe, used to be a peaceful place in the Christian world. But now it was at the center of a movement challenging the church's power. Hus had already upset many leaders by speaking out against the church's corruption and saying that some popes weren't real leaders. His sermons weren't just religious talks anymore. They were powerful messages that inspired people. The church didn't want this to continue. During a time when the church was already split, Hus was adding more problems. He had the support of rich nobles and regular people, and he wasn't afraid to speak out against unfair practices like selling forgiveness, called indulgences, or giving church jobs for money, called simony. Hus said out loud what many people were thinking. The church had lost its way. In 1411, Hus held a special funeral for 3 of his followers, Hudek, Kredelko, and Polak, who had been executed. This wasn't just a simple goodbye. Hus treated them like heroes. Giving them honors usually meant for saints. This was a bold move, showing that Hus wasn't just talking about small changes. He wanted big reforms. This act caused a big split in Bohemia. People who agreed with Hus were called Hussites. They wanted to fix the church. Others stayed loyal to the traditional Catholic Church and thought Hus was wrong and dangerous. In the middle was King Wenceslas IV, who tried to make peace in 1412. But Hus didn't want to compromise. He believed only in Jesus' authority and would not take back anything he said. In 1413, Hus made his ideas official in a writing called De Ecclesia, about the church. He said the church had moved far away from what Jesus taught. Inspired by another reformer, John Wycliffe, Hus criticized church leaders for being corrupt and named specific people in his writing. He used a new technology called woodblock printing to spread his message quickly. Then came Sigismund, King Wenceslas's half-brother. He called for a big church meeting called the Council of Constance in 1414 to try to fix things. Hus was invited and promised safe travel so he could share his ideas. Hus believed this promise, went to the council, and even preached while waiting. But the church broke its promise. Officials said Hus had broken the rules by speaking publicly, so they put him in prison. Even in jail, Hus believed if he could explain his ideas using the Bible, people would understand he wasn't a bad person, just someone who wanted the church to return to its true teachings. But the council didn't want to listen. They didn't care about the Bible, they wanted Hus to give in. Hus said he would only change his beliefs if someone could prove him wrong with the Bible. So, they handed him over to the government. On July 6, 1415, Hus was burned at the stake. To stop people from keeping his ashes as a memory, they were thrown into the Rhine River. But they couldn't destroy his ideas. After Hus died, things got even worse. His supporters were angry. A year later, his friend Jerome of Prague was also executed. Another supporter, Jacob of Mies, barely escaped by staying quiet but still believing in Hus's teachings. The Council of Constance tried to stop the movement by also speaking against Wycliffe, but it didn't work. In 1419, the Hussite Wars began. These weren't small fights, they were large rebellions. Hus's ideas and people's anger at the church fueled the battles. A leader named Jan Hus helped the Hussites win many early fights. Even though they were finally defeated in 1434, they had made such a big impact that the church had to talk with them. In 1436, the church allowed Bohemia to have its own way of practicing religion. Today, Jan Hus is remembered far beyond Bohemia. He's seen as a brave man who stood up for what he believed, no matter what it cost. The church didn't admit it was wrong until 1999, but that apology showed how important Hus really was. His story lives on, not just as someone who died for his beliefs, but as someone who helped start big changes that couldn't be stopped, even by fire.